Hi, I'm Rageh Omaar, and this is Young British and Muslim. We're going to be discussing some of the most talked about topics and, of course, hear stories of inspiring British Muslims making a difference. And you can join that conversation at hashtag YBMITV on Twitter, but do keep it clean, friendly and respectful. Now, each week we discuss a topic with the help of 3 guests here with me in the studio. Here's who's with us this week. Now, in this episode, we want to talk about one of the most important yet underreported aspects of the British Muslim experience, what it's like to be young British Muslim women and the enormous challenges they face both within the Muslim society and in national life. Now, British Muslim women can be among the most marginalised group in society, and here's some of the reasons why. In employment, British Muslim women are 71% more likely than white Christian women to be unemployed, even when they had the same educational skills. On our streets, incidents of Islamophobia are reportedly on the rise, with 67% of Muslim women who were victims being described as visibly Muslim due to them wearing Islamic clothing when the incidents happened. And in mosques even, more than a third still don't offer facilities for women to worship. Now, we're going to be looking at these challenges as well as the success stories and the fact that finding a voice to talk about either is often one of the biggest additional obstacles British Muslim women face. And all of my guests today have one thing in common: they have managed to find their voice to share their concerns and stories. Welcome to all 3 of you. It's a real pleasure to have you. Let me start off with you first, Tamina. You're an engineer, you're a cricket coach, you're many things. But tell us about your childhood story, because all of your successes were preceded by some very, very painful experiences.
So I was sexually abused by my cousin when I was about 12 years old, and it went on for several years. And it was only when I was 18 years old when I put a stop to things, where I threatened to tell the police and take it a step further. Since then, I mean, I very much kept it under the wraps. And what happened was that it was on the day of Margaret Thatcher's funeral, funny enough, that I said to, my mum called me up and she said, when are you coming home? And I turned around and I said, I refuse to come home until you tell my brother and my dad what's been going on. And it kind of snowballed from there. They found out, we had a lengthy discussion. My relatives got involved, and they came, they apologised, they cried, and then a few days later they turned around and said to me, well, is it time that we get you married? And my sadness and everything else that I felt turned to anger, but it's made me more determined to speak up, to say to girls that this kind of thing is not okay to brush under the carpet. Marriage doesn't solve anything. A lot of mental strength is required to get through something like this. And really give a chance to young girls to speak up. You
have really spoken up very vocally, very vociferously. What has been the consequence of that? I mean, for you, both positively, but also, has there been some comeback as a result of that? I mean, not just within your family, but just wider within the Muslim community.
I've had people go up to my friends and, tell them, why is your friend, shaming the Pakistani community?
By talking about issues of abuse and survivors.
Exactly. Why does she have to reveal it in the public domain? Is she not ashamed? There's nothing wrong with her, and it's been hard. I've even had it from my own family. Why are you publicly speaking out? What about the concept? What about our izzat, which is honour in our culture? And it's, I mean, I push through it. It's so hard when you have it from you're outside of your family. but also from your own members of the family. And I pushed through because I know there are other girls who are going exactly through the same thing, and if it helps one of those young girls to speak up and do something about their life, then that's...
Do you think things are changing for, should there be, and hopefully there's, much less numbers, of young girls, British Muslim girls who've been through what you have. But do you think there is a change in young girls who are victims of abuse speaking out? Or has anything changed is what I'm asking you, do you think?
In my experience, no. I know of individuals who have gone through child sexual abuse but have failed to speak up because their family have turned around and said, you're going to bring shame on our family. It's your fault. And they are reluctant to speak out because of those kind of things that are being said by members of their own family and even friends. Even friends have said, forget about it, move on. There's nothing you can do.
That's very, very, that's shocking. Anita, I mean, you're working on sort of equality and in equality for women and Muslim women. And you've opened, or started this initiative, Open My Mosque. What was behind it? What brought you to that area? To what is Open Mosque about?
So
Open My Mosque.
Open My Mosque is effectively, it's a social media campaign where we ask women and men all over the country to send in the stories they have about mosques, the good and the bad. And the reason that we did that was back in 2015, I remember the Muslim Council of Britain were just launching their initiative called Visit My Mosque, so similar name. This was about opening the doors of mosques to the public so they can come in and see what it's like and
demystify the whole thing of what is a mosque. Yeah.
And we thought, okay, that's brilliant. That's great, but that rubs a bit hard when a lot of the mosques in this country don't let us in. Or when they do let us in, it's certainly not with samosas and chai. It's, go and find the nearest broom cupboard, and that's where you'll be praying. So we sort of sat around a group of friends, really sat around a table when we heard about that Visit My Mosque launch, and we all sort of started almost frothing at the mouth because we were like, we've been trying for a long time to just get access to pray in mosques, and now we're opening doors up to everybody. Like, that would be fine if we'd done the former, but we haven't.
What kind of reaction did you meet with, though, from different sort of mosques? Because, I mean, there's one amazing story about you going to visit a mosque in sort of central London. To tell people about that experience.
So this was also at the very beginning of Open My Mosque. So I converted to Islam, first of all. I converted in the year 2000. I've been Muslim since then. And I've always had a difficulty with mosques because where I used to go to a church and the doors were always open, in a mosque you're never sure whether the door's open. You don't always know where the women's door is. And when you get in, you don't know what you're going to be greeted with. Is it going to be some shouting bloke who you don't know, or is it going to be a lovely space? You just don't know. It could be either. So it kind of fills you with dread going sometimes. So this particular experience, I worked up the road from this mosque, and I used to go there at lunchtime to pray. They would make space for me. There weren't very many women who went, but they'd make space. They had about 3 stories. Then at one point I went and they said, oh no, women aren't allowed anymore. And when I questioned why, the person didn't want to tell me, but I spoke to a few of the other worshippers, the male worshippers, who were also really annoyed at this. And they said, well, the committee has changed and they've decided that it's now not Islamic to let women in the mosque, which is crazy. So we decided to do something about it. The first thing we did was ask, can we meet with the committee and can we talk to them? We sent 3 letters, they didn't respond. We sent another letter saying, look, you really have to talk to us because it's so important that we can do our prayers. They're as much an obligation on us as they are on the men. And this is in a central place. So please meet with us, or else we'll take this story to the media, we'll take it wider, because we needed to show that we have teeth as well. They still didn't meet with us, so we did take that story to, first of all, Asian Network, and then it went a bit wider, and it actually got picked up. It did. So, and that was a real start for us, I think, for Open My Mosque.
Talking about sort of the role of the media and the power of the media, Halima, you started the Black Muslim Times shortly after sort of graduating. Tell me, what inspired you, and what kind of stories are you trying to sort of tell, and do what Anita and Tamina have been saying ring very true with you?
It definitely rings true in terms of speaking about how Muslim women's voices are silenced in the Muslim community, especially with very dire circumstances, whether it's abuse or access to mosques. And with access to mosques, that's something that I have experienced.
Right.
But knowing that there are women like Anita that are handling and taking control of the situation and trying to make solutions and make access possible for Muslim women is just really inspiring to me. And so with the Black Muslim Times UK, it's an online publication that I founded not long after I'd graduated with a degree in English with creative writing. And for me, that's kind of my starting point, because I've grown up as a very avid reader and somebody who enjoys storytelling. And I realized that the things that I was reading, I wasn't seeing my identity represented in. And so I began writing for different independent media publications, and it still felt like it wasn't enough. Whether I was talking about being Muslim or being Black British, and whether it's about race or faith. And I just thought to myself, why not have the two come together? My identity isn't monolithic. It's made up of both my race, my faith, and my gender. And so the Black Muslim Times UK, it's primarily focused on interviewing different members of the Black British Muslim community. And these are businesswomen, these are sports women, these are, it's a wide community in general. And so, of course, it's not just one space that we're focused on, and it's not just one story being told. And so I really just want to highlight the work that's already being done and amplify those voices and just provide a platform and a sort of archive for these voices as well.
I mean, speaking to all three of you, it sort of strikes me that, especially on this question of, being young British Muslims and who are also women, you're in a particular sort of place in society over all of these issues that is between a rock and a hard place, because by speaking out, by wanting to press for sort of, a wider discussion on all of these subjects, it's important to do, but at the same time, people don't want you to do it within the community. And there's this sense of, look, don't kick up, all the fuss, don't shame, Do you think there's a common theme there, that the obstacles behind you sort of doing the work you do comes from within as well as without? Halima, let me start with you.
Absolutely. I remember when I'd first started the publication, overwhelmingly there's been positive responses, but there's still a few who are of the mind that what I'm doing is causing division. It's seen as something that is militant, it's not necessary. They speak about there not being any racism in Islam, and because the name is so bold, it's Black and it's Muslim, and so immediately people think I'm trying to exclude people, when really it's about amplifying the voices that I don't get to hear in the Muslim community, which is why it was started in the first place. And so there is that small section of people in the Muslim community who see it as a form of division, and why is it necessary, and we're all just one ummah, we're just one community, so there's no need for it. But then I believe that I wouldn't have felt the need for it if there wasn't a need for it. If I felt that when we discuss the Muslim community in Britain, we're discussing how varied it is.
Hugely varied,
Huge, exactly. And we're coming from all corners of the world, and it's not just an Asian-centric or Arab-centric narrative. We have Africans, we have Caribbeans, and I want to see a space predominantly online for those voices.
Anita, do you feel that that's true, that, being a young British Muslim woman, you're between a rock and a hard place, don't speak out about these things, you're bringing, you're just confirming stereotypes about Islam and so forth?
Yeah, and so we get that a lot. So what's very interesting when we have, when one of our stories gets picked up in the media, we'll always get a very clear gender division in the comments. So the people who are sort of very happy that that story's come out or it's being told tend to be women or men who care, usually like spouses, partners. And on the other side, you have men saying, oh, we scored an own goal for our community, what does she think she's doing? She's making us all look like the sexists they all say we are. And so it kind of slows down our own progress, because of course Muslims are only as sexist as anybody else. Everywhere's a patriarchy. So it's no different, and we do need to talk about these things. And the other interesting thing with the mosque issue is that we try to speak to people like the Charities Commission, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, about the gender inequality that operates in mosques who ban women, who are about a third, as you said at the beginning. But those places then say, those statutory bodies will then say, oh, well, but, you know, we go to the imam and we speak to the imam and he says this is in the religion. So who's the authority, the woman or the imam, right? And that's really difficult. And because those mosques have structured themselves in such a way that there aren't women at the top, women are not therefore seen as an authority on whether that's part of the religion or it's sexism even within the religion. So we've got that kind of double bind going on as well with the mosque issue and trying to take recourse to public bodies on it.
Tamina, one of the things that must have made, or does make, addressing this issue of child sexual abuse from within the Muslim community much more difficult is this whole other issue of sort of the grooming, you know, the Rochdale sort of Asian sort of so-called grooming sort of thing. They say, you know, anyone who talks about it is just that must make it also very difficult as well, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many comments from people who've said, look, Rochdale's happening, Oxford is happening. Why are you amplifying the problem? You know, why do you need to speak up about it? You're making our community look bad. And I've had, you know, the other side of the, you know, coin too, where I've had people say, you do need to speak up. You know, you do need to encourage girls to go to a place where they can feel supported. I find it frustrating to some degree.
Yeah.
You know, we have these issues. There are people who want the problem to be tackled, but at the same time, they don't want you to, openly speak up. If you don't speak up, how do you raise the awareness? So it's a catch-22 situation.
Yeah. Now, I want to go to an interview which I think everyone will find interesting, because it might seem strange that in an episode about Muslim women, we're about to play an interview with a white man. But former Attorney General Dominic Grieve was tasked with going around the whole country looking at the challenges being faced by all Muslims living in the UK. In his report, he found that Muslim women faced a triple penalty of gender, colour and faith, and an acute disadvantage in employment on the streets and in their community. Mr Grieve spoke to me about this and what he thinks can be done about it.
Firstly, they're undoubtedly suffering the effects of Islamophobia. I have absolutely no doubt about that at all. The evidence was, I'm afraid, overwhelming. Examples were young people filling in job application forms and finding that they'd filled in the form, they got rejected at the first interview, and one or two of them, being canny, then decided to submit exactly the same form but putting a different name at the top which didn't identify them as being Muslim, and were immediately getting interviews. I mean, that's a serious, really serious issue. The only possible explanation was that they were being written off at this start because they were somehow strange or might be different from other people. So we picked that up a lot. And of course, particularly for those who are more religiously observant, women wearing the veil, not the veil, but wearing a headscarf, actually Islamophobic remarks and insults in the street. And if you're wearing the veil, then even more acutely.
So Islamophobia is very real from what you saw?
Yes, it is. And I'm afraid that because of terrorism, it's probably got more widespread. People are frightened of the other. And because of terrorism, which is Islamist terrorism, they identify Muslims as being people who are in some way radically different from them. And I think that then starts to create this mood, which is, as I say, very corrosive and very damaging, particularly for people who want to get on and want to participate in wider society. So that's plainly seen as an obstacle and as a real problem. Another one is that, and this applies particularly to Muslim women, is that some of the cultural aspects of patriarchal societies remain, and they feel very disadvantaged in terms of involvement in wider community. One's got to understand that if you are religious, then the first place where you're likely to be involved in a social context outside of your family is going to be your mosque.
Yeah.
Now, if the mosque is dysfunctional in the way it operates, it discriminates against women, for that matter, it's not operating properly as a charitable organisation because it's showing far too much deference to elders and not enough system and method in the way it's working, this is going to give you a rather bad start in wider community engagement. Firstly, it's going to make it much more difficult for you to market yourself and go out and do other things. And it may also give you a distorted view of how the system works. And women particularly have picked this up. I mean, I felt that young women were absolutely at the forefront of breaking down barriers and wanting a wider engagement and marketing what they had to offer as human beings with a religious background to the wider society.
But one of the things that comes back in the statistics that are there and available is that, you know, young British Muslim women, or British Muslim women per se, face the greatest barriers, particularly when it comes to sort of employment and leading their own lives, because they face a triple whammy, if you like, of sort of the patriarchal sort of society that you do find often in Muslim communities, the fact that they're Muslim and the fact that they're women.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. But interestingly, and this is, I think, the positive, precisely because of that, they seem to have become in some ways much more outspoken and much more willing to challenge these things than some of their male counterparts. So some of the most positive messages I felt that we got were in some of our provincial cities. Birmingham springs to mind, but there were other examples as well, where we just met highly articulate, can-do Muslim women who are both reconciling their faith and being empowered by their faith with wider engagement and wanting to change how their own communities were working, but above all wanting to offer something to the wider society. This wasn't just about focusing on their own, it was about trying to do something for the people around them.
That was Dominick Grieve talking to me. Lots of points to get into in that chat with him. Halima, tell me, did some of what he was saying resonate with you, particularly, you know, the transition from graduating and trying to find a sort of job, particularly in sort of, you know, areas that are, you know, where nepotism and whatever else happens, publishing and sort of getting into the media, not easy.
100%. That is exactly the experience that he was explaining that I went through. And I was someone that graduated with a 2-1. I was doing extracurriculars alongside to kind of booster up my CV. And I was quite idealistic. And I was told, you know, I've always grown up with the work ethic of, you know, work hard, make sure you're working hard and you're going to get that thing that you're working hard for. And it was kind of like my bubble burst after I graduated. It was like the real world hit. And it wasn't a case of just, you know, work hard. It's work hard and have connections and have something in place, and it is who you know. And especially with the publishing industry, which, if I'm not mistaken, is, you know, well over 50% white British. There is a very small representation of ethnic minorities in the publishing industry as a whole. And so, of course, I'm coming in both as an ethnic minority and a visibly Muslim woman. And I always say I don't have an English name, so you're getting an ethnic minority name on a CV as well. And that's something that, of course, is never proved outwardly, but there is implicit bias. And especially with the publishing industry as well. And when you see the names and the faces of the publishing industry, it's incredibly skewed to one particular identity. And so with creating the Black Muslim Times UK, it was kind of making a way for myself. And there's things that I've been doing with this publication that I probably never would have done, even if I had gone the traditional route with publishing.
I think the other thing he was saying that was very interesting, though, Anita and Tamina, is that it's because the difficulties that British Muslim women are facing that makes them the most sort of keen to try and, you know, break down these obstacles which are really difficult. Do you think he's right in that?
I certainly do. But when it comes to mosques, I feel like mosques are the problem, because not all mosques are problematic, right? But the ones that are steeped in this kind of tradition from India from 300 years ago, basically. And so the men who go there can get caught up in those politics. Now, for us women who are pushed out of those spaces, we've got nothing to lose. We literally have nothing to lose. So one of the good stories I've had is a woman in Cambridgeshire lives in a small town. There's only one mosque, doesn't let women in. She's tried and tried and tried. No response. So now she's got some money from the local council. She runs religious lessons every week for everybody, men, women and children. She's just done their first ever big Eid fair. She's just doing fantastic things in that small town and really bringing people together.
Yeah. Tamina, how did you react to what he was sort of saying?
I very much have to agree with the patriarchal society that Muslim women live in.
Yeah, which still exists in a very, very strong way.
Exactly. I mean, it's broader, but it's kind of, I feel it's worse within, within our culture and within our community. Muslim women are silenced. Like Anita was saying, that going into the mosque, women are put to one side, aren't considered. And I feel like Muslim women sometimes are complicit in these problems. So we have a ladies subcommittee, for example, in the town I live in. And part of the problem is that whenever there's something that needs to be challenged, they sit back and don't do anything about it. And I feel like actually there are valid reasons we should be challenging on, but because of the society we've grown up in and the way women are silenced, we should do as men say and not go any beyond.
Do you think there's emerging though a generational change in that things are sort of shifting? I mean, not in the most difficult sort of areas, I grant you, but in lots of other areas that people are not wanting to go the traditional route that their parents wanted, be a doctor, be a lawyer, kind of thing.
I mean, certainly when it comes to things like relationships and marriage now, for example, I've got friends who are kind of seeking out their own partners. They're not having the traditional arranged marriage. And I think that's something really positive. And, we do have a new young generation who are willing to stand up. But I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Speaking on that, as we talked about earlier, as well as the challenges, there are many success stories that need to be talked about for young British Muslim women. And in each episode of our show, we have been highlighting inspirational people from around the country who are trying to achieve great things in areas that we don't often hear about. This week's story is about one particularly inspirational young woman.
When I first began the sport, I had to hide the sport from my family simply because I was afraid that they might ask me to choose between family values and the sport. It was unheard of an Asian girl going into a combat sport, especially one that is so brutal. I kept it hidden for around 5 years. I would train religiously every Sunday. I would wake up extra early on a Sunday morning, do the house chores, make sure my mum is happy, and then ask her very politely if I can attend the gym. She just thought I was going for a run or just doing a little bit of aerobics. I eventually decided to tell my parents exactly what I was doing. This was due to the fact that I felt as though I was living a double life, one where I was a fighter in the ring, and on the other hand, I was a traditional daughter. So I went through an arranged marriage and that actually collapsed. And at that point, I felt as though I needed my parents' blessing in terms of moving forward with the sport. I guess I'm not the most conventional fighter that you would come across because I'm a female, I'm petite, I'm Muslim, I'm Asian, all of the things that you wouldn't traditionally see as a fighter. On the other hand, I'm a fierce fighter who steps into the ring and I leave nothing in the ring. I give it my all, and I believe that life is all about fighting through challenges, and that's what I do in the ring and outside the ring. Initially, when I first started, it was incredibly difficult to find a gym that catered for a female-only class, female-only coaches, being dressed in a traditional manner. It was very difficult. However, we have come a long way, and we can see that brands are now using sisters with hijabs, and it's very trendy. And accommodating people's faith and their identity is really important to have an equal playing field within sports, so we can have the best of the best.
What do you think of Roxana's story? It's quite remarkable, isn't it?
It's really cool.
I mean, I as a sportswoman myself, I think she's absolutely incredible. To kind of break the mould, to kind of be firm in her standing and kind of go after what she's passionate about. We need more of those girls to stand up.
Tell us more about your involvement in sports, because I said at the beginning, I talked about your sort of, cricket, but how did you get into it? What happened?
I actually used to facilitate netball for friends and local women. I got drafted in one evening, and I just stood there and I thought, I hate netball. What the hell am I doing? And decided that as a keen cricketer and having watched all the games in Pakistan v India, let's try cricket. And it kind of snowballed from there. Set up a ladies' team, took the reins, recruited people, started playing matches, got the local association to set up a cricket league for us to play in. And I've kind of been heavily involved since, so it's 5 years now. And I kind of got my teeth stuck into everything cricket.
I mean, you've all discovered your voices in a lot of ways, despite all the sort of challenges that we've talked about that young British Muslim women sort of face. What was the spark that made you want to start all of the things, from Open My Mosque to, the Black Muslim Times to speaking out as well? What about you? I mean, was it social media? Was it what?
I was just tired of being silenced and being asked to fit into a culture that I didn't want to conform with. I wasn't happy with the way, I had to be told. I was told to do certain things. I wasn't allowed to, be the person I wanted to be. I remember being a kid, I wanted to be, in my school hockey team, and told that actually it's not the thing for a Muslim girl to do. And so when all of this, the sexual abuse story came out, that was a turning point for me. And I was like, right, I've had enough. I don't want people to tell me how to live my life and what I can and can't do. And I call myself a rebel because I don't conform to the culture and I go against everything everyone says.
Absolutely. Do you sometimes wonder that, is there going to be a sort of a Muslim sort of Me Too sort of moment?
Yes, I think it's kind of starting.
Already, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Immediately you said that, I thought of the hashtag that's on Twitter.
Yes.
The Me Too hashtag.
Yeah.
And many Muslim women have come forward with their own personal stories. And it's unfortunate that a lot of it has happened in one of the holiest places for Muslims as well, where they've been sexually abused and in a place where you're meant to feel like this is your most secure and your safest, but it's a place where many women have experienced sexual harassment. So I definitely feel like it has started.
Yeah. And are you all optimistic about the sort of the future of making sure that change is moved forward for young British Muslim women? I mean, not just young, but British Muslim women full stop. Are you optimistic about the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think progress is, has been slow, but the tide is turning. There are, on the back of, hashtag Mosque Me Too, started by Mona Al-Tahawi, an Egyptian feminist. A lot of discussions are happening around the country about, child abuse and, the hashtag Me Too movement. And I think that, once women are empowered and are in a supportive group who share the same stories as other women, eventually there will be a bigger movement that drives change within their own local communities.
Okay. And Anita, are you optimistic as well?
I'm an optimistic person, so I'm going to say yes, but there are things that, as Tamina says, there's been slow progress in some areas. We're seeing now mosques that are being built by British-born Muslims with British, British identity, places like Rumi's Cave, the new Cambridge Mosque, which are really open not just to women, but the disabled, the old, the general public. So I think that's making me feel a lot more positive about our future. And, I'd like to see more importance put on addressing where there are issues of discrimination in mosques still. But I definitely see the new mosques that are coming up by British-born Muslims as a good thing.
Halima, what about you? I mean, in terms of sort of Black British Muslim sort of voices, but also just, in the media and in publications.
Absolutely, definitely feel optimistic about the changes that are currently happening and the changes that are to come. And I think also understanding that we have to have our own agency in the change that we want to make, of course. And so with Tamina and Anita and the work that they're doing, they empowered themselves first before they went forward to make those changes and also lead to empowerment of the community. And so I think it's about understanding the the power that we have within ourselves first and foremost, and then taking that forward. And of course, there are the structural barriers that are taking place, but still being able to make progress despite these things that are happening.
All right, well, unfortunately, that's it for this episode. Now, there's been some issues we've discussed today which you may be affected by. If so, details of sources of support are at the bottom of your screen. And if you haven't done so already, let us know what you think using the hashtag YBMITV. And thanks to my guests, Tamina Hussain, Anita Nayar and Halima Shode. And thanks to you for watching. Until the next time, goodbye.